G'day everyone, welcome to this edition of the F1 Armchair Experts podcast for the Bahrain Grand Prix. I'm Durko, your host, and as usual, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Big T in Ireland. How are you, Big T?
I'm good, man. I'm very good.
Good. You're offering a salute to the new season ahead and what turned out to be a good race. I suppose we better stop dribbling on here and just you push the buttons you're in and get the intro done. Let's go talk F1.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Myself and Durko are going to dissect the Bahrain 2022 Grand Prix, the first of the season 2022. We would be interested in hearing your thoughts as well, so please do leave a comment below this post, or even just message myself or Durko if you've something you want to say. And so the first topic, Durko, I want to talk about is Ferrari. So Ferrari got their first 1-2 since Singapore 2019, I believe. That was won by Vettel. Charles Leclerc, P1, Carlos Sainz, P2. He also got the fastest lap of the race. He also got driver of the day, and he also got pole in qualifying. So what's your opinion of Ferrari getting back to the front?
I've got to say, I think it's awesome to see the Scuderia back in their winning ways. I think Matteo Binotto has been under a shitload of pressure for time now, because when you look back over the last couple of years, Ferrari went through a heap of bosses. Matteo came in as one of the founding employees of Ferrari. He's been there for a long time, and he had a big weight on his shoulders that he had to get rid of. Effectively, the monkey on his back was to bring the team back to winning ways, and I think he's done that. I think he's completely probably re-engineered or started from the ground up again, because the cars, it was just like the Lacey Berger days. They were just struggling, and they just couldn't get it right. The odd win here and there, but I think they've completely come forward with something, a totally different package, re-engineered the car, and possibly even the way the garage is set up. I don't know what it is, but then on the other hand, it could be the fact that this current aero package and design of the car actually suits them better than what the old rules and regs are. But I think it's great to see. I mean, I've never been a Ferrari fan, but I've got to say that current F175, it is the hottest piece of kit on the grid. To look at, it is just unreal. It's a thing of beauty. My older son Sammy was there watching the race with me, and he just kept saying, Dad, he said, that car just looks unreal as it goes around, especially under the night lights, he said, of the Bahrain circuit. I just hope Ferrari can potentially, upset the apple cart this year and take the Constructors' title. If not, a shitload of wins for either Leclerc or Sainz can bag a few himself.
I've got to agree with you. Like the Ferrari just looks amazing going around the track. The black rear wing, that deep red matte kind of a red colour that they've got going on. They've clearly pulled everything together. The look of the car, like you said, Binotto was engine designer before, so he's definitely had an input into, getting that Ferrari engine on par with Mercedes, and you can even see it going back the grid as well, and we'll talk about it later on. But Haas getting up there as well, Alfa Romeo doing well, all Ferrari powered engines. I think at one point during the race, I think actually how it finished was 6 of the last 6 cars were all Mercedes powered, and I think the majority of the top 10 were all Ferrari powered. So and I'm counting the last as the flag went down, obviously discounting the Hondas, but it was really good to see Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. I think who you had actually tipped Carlos Sainz as being a kind of a one to be reckoned with this year. Do you remember your prediction from the last episode?
I do actually check it during the 10 laps to go during the race. It was Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, and I was there just going, I'm going to get this right, I'm going to get this right. But then the fuel pump in the Red Bull decided to take a leave of absence and stop working.
Yeah. That's definitely a topic that we need to talk about. Going on to talk about Honda. 3 Hondas out. Not good. It started with Gasly. His power unit decided to shit itself and barbecue itself. And then we had Verstappen complaining of power issues, and then Perez. This is definitely something that's Honda related. It was actually really upsetting to see this in the first race of a new generation or new era of power units. But what do you know about the problems they were seemingly having?
I think Gasly is unknown as to what his exact problem was, because I was just thinking back to years ago when an engine would blow. It looked like the team had elected a Pope. There was just plumes of white smoke would just piss out the back of the car. But with the Red Bulls, I've read this morning since I've woken up again that apparently the fuel pumps in the 2 RBR cars went. So hence, I don't know what the fuel pumps got to do with Verstappen talking about his steering playing up. Whether it just comes down to a hydraulic issue rather than the actual fuel pump, I don't know. But I know when Chico went into that corner and he was trying to defend Hamilton, he got into the corner and just stalled it. So whether it was just a hydraulic failure on both, I don't know. Because it was interesting. The one thing about Gasly's was that when he was belting along, it all of a sudden just shut down. So whether it was a mass hydraulic failure on his car or what, I'm not sure. But I think there's going to be some head scratched at 18, also Red Bull. Because technically they're not racing under the Honda brand anymore. They've only got the small sticker about that big on the engine cover that says HRC for Honda Racing. That's the only identifying mark now. They've just gone back to other forms of advertising, because they used to have Honda sprayed right across the rear wing, but that's since a thing of the past. But, there was all this praise because, Max got the title, heap of wins last year, and that was some redemption for Honda to sort of say, oh yeah, maybe we should stay in the sport, but we shouldn't walk away. But they are still here, so in an unbranded form at least. But at the end of the day, look, it's the first race of 23 this season, because there will be a 23rd race, and I'll talk later about what the rumour is for that. But yeah, it's the first race. I mean, they always say the first 3 flyaway races are just glorified test sessions anyway before they get to Barcelona, and it's a European race where they can really start to tighten the screws down.
I'm going to share something with you there real quick that I found just after the race. This is a post from AMUS. I think it's Auto Motorsport und Sport, is it? Or Auto Munter und Sport, or something like that. Anyway, I can't remember the exact name. But this is a tweet that they had put out before the race. I'll read it out for those that are not watching us on YouTube. But it says, the teams and the FIA are worried about fuel delivery. The main pump from the catch tank into the high pressure pump is a standard part built by Pirelli since this year. During the tests, some teams had problems with the electronics, which were cast in a resin box next to the pump. Cracks developed. This allowed petrol to penetrate and destroy the electronics. Allegedly, this was the reason why hardly any race distances were covered during the tests. After qualifying, some teams asked the FIA to check the pumps. The request was granted, of course. Nothing would be more embarrassing than a mass death because of this part. I thought that was interesting, because that kind of relates back to what we saw in the race. And apparently Horner alluded to it as well in an interview after the race. They were talking about lift pumps. And what the lift pumps are is there's about 3 or 4 lift pumps in the fuel tank. And the lift pumps feed this kind of almost kind of like a Coke bottle type cylinder, which is actually immersed in the fuel tank, and that Coke bottle cylinder then is what provides the pressure to applies the feed of fuel to the main fuel pump, and the main fuel pump pushes it to the injectors. And the problem seems to be with these lift pumps, and these lift pumps are actually situated in the corners of the fuel tank, which actually pick up all the last remaining little drops of fuel to make sure, as the car is driving forward and the fuel is being pushed to the back of the bladder, because these fuel tanks are actually like a rubber bladder, is that the fuel gets picked up and actually keeps this continuity of fuel pressure through this Coke bottle type cylinder, and obviously then into the fuel pump and then into the fuel injectors. And seemingly it's these lift pumps where the problems are existing, and that's what they think it could be. Oh, sorry, the lift pumps feed the collector. That's what the Coke bottle type thing is. It's called a collector. So they think the issue is somewhere between the lift pumps and the collector, and that's what every time the Red Bulls were going into attack mode, or they were going into whatever engine mode, for overtaking or for power or for for attacking the car in front, it was pulling so much fuel in that it actually couldn't work quick enough, and these little lift pumps may have shut down, and that's what led to the problem that Verstappen had first. And then as Perez started to put down the power and tried to gain places, it also happened to him as well. There's also a theory that somewhere along the chain, that Gasly's fuel pump, there may have been a crack that fuel may have escaped, and that's what caused the fire, because they think that the overheating is too unlikely, because they had their cooling pretty much under control. So they think it's something like either hydraulic or fuel or something basically got to the exhaust and lit the car up, and that's what shut everything down, because the moment fuel gets through the electronics, it shuts everything off. It's just it's a fail-safe that's built into the cars. So I thought that was fascinating. It seems that it's and these lift pumps and fuel pumps are actually built by Magneti Marelli. And if people don't know who Magneti Marelli are, they're one of the world's biggest suppliers of race engine parts. And just Google them. Just Google Marelli.com and see what they do in terms of racing and Formula One and GT and touring cars and all kinds of rallying, everything. They're a huge company. And it's unlike them to build something that would fail like this. So, a few question marks. I think we'll find out before Saudi Arabia exactly what the issue was. But that's the kind of gist of it from what I've picked up from technical forums since the end of the race.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because Magneti Marelli, as you said, they've been around, for years and years, decades, in all levels, top levels of motorsport. Just getting onto the subject while we're talking about fuel is obviously the performance of the Mercedes, and pre-showed you and I just quickly glossed over it was the fact that the Mercedes, most of their engine cars, the McLarens, the Aston Martins, and for some, sake of argument, the Mercs themselves weren't performing that well. And the discussion about all that seems to be around the E10 fuel they've introduced for this season. If anyone doesn't know E10, it's been in Australia here for years, and it's 10% ethanol added to your regular unleaded blend. It's commonplace here in Australia. I know you've said it's not big in Europe at the moment, but they say that the Mercs just can't get the blend, or they can't get the engine mapping right to work with the E10, because effectively the fuel isn't as potent as what straight 100% unleaded is.
Yeah, Mercedes were definitely known for their thermal efficiency when it came to building race engines. So they had a very high dependency on high octane fuel. This E10 has clearly hit them hard, and again, we talked about it in a previous episode of the podcast. In Europe, well, I can't speak for the rest of Europe, but I know here in Ireland, it's only E5. I think is the ethanol blend, the 5%. So this 10% ethanol that they're now, all Mercedes powered engines clearly seem to have an issue with it. But in saying that, you know, Hamilton still made it on the podium today. So I mean, are they on top of it? Maybe with their engine side, but maybe just not quite caught up with their aero. Um, do you think? Would you say it's all engine powered? Their issues. There is. Do you think it's all fuel issue?
I think the fuel is a part of it. I think all the teams will struggle because I mean they're all on the same fuel. I mean, yeah, they've got different, brands of sponsors for their fuel supply and all that stuff. You get Petronas, Shell, Mobil, whoever. But at the end of the day, all of the fuel supplied to all the cars on the grid is all controlled by one fuel company anyway. I think maybe Ferrari have just been in the background preparing for the E10 for longest, hence we've seen the performance of them over the course of the weekend. The Hondas might be struggling with a bit, but the Red Bull's been flying anyway. So it's difficult to say, but I think one thing that I'm going out on a limb here, maybe one thing that has backfired for Mercedes is the zero side pod principle. As we just discussed in the last podcast, it might not be working for them. Is the car overheating? Have they got some tricky way of telling the drivers you got to lay off the throttle a bit because you're starting to cook the engine? But then they wouldn't have come up with this design of zero side pods without knowing it's going to have some efficiencies for them. But I think maybe it's not working as well as what the full side pod is doing for some cars like the Red Bull, Haas, and even the bathtub side pod that Ferrari have got.
Yeah, we said it last episode about the Mercedes. I just don't see anything amazing out of that car in terms of aero or anything that they did in terms of cutting their side pods back. I think Williams went the same route as well, and there wasn't really anything fantastic from them either. They finished at the back as well. It's going to be a case of, like you said, these first couple of races going to be testing everything out, trying to eke out iron out the cracks, or what do you say, iron out the kinks, as they say. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see on what Mercedes can come up with, but I definitely think their aero is a massive part of it. I don't think they've got their flow together. I think they've gone in a direction with their suspension. I just don't think it's engine related. Now, in saying that, Ferrari have clearly got it together. Ferrari were although they didn't pull away like what we're used to in previous seasons, where the Mercedes would have just they would be 20 seconds ahead after 10 laps. We didn't see that from Ferrari either, so the engines do seem like they're on par. Alpine are in there as well with the Renault engine, or Alpine engine, whatever way it's branded. And the Hondas as well, I think they were all pretty much, there was nothing kind of jumping out that was from an engine side that was amazing. But again, look, we don't know what aero differences are between all the cars just yet, so we'll have to see which teams take which direction going forward. I want to move on there to we're going to talk about Haas. I just want to say a big congratulations to any of the Haas fans out there. I know you've waited a long time, and I coming from a McLaren fan, I feel your pain of season after season of poor results, back at the grid stuff, constantly being in the media, nothing ever positive. And then I think only as little as a month ago, Haas were again in the headlines when it came to the whole Russian sponsorship and Mazepin leaving the team. And what a turnaround. I mean, literally a week, 10 days ago, Magnussen joined the team, and at the end of the first lap, he was P5. I was literally blown away. What's your opinion on Haas being where they are? I think Mick Schumacher finished P11, I think, in the end. So I mean, he just missed out on the points, but he was pretty racy. I actually made a note during my race notes there that who was he getting racy against? He was getting racy against the Alfa Romeos. Yeah, it was Ferrari versus Ferrari. Um, I was just blown away by Haas. Considering where, like I said, where they were, 10 days ago. What's your thoughts?
I think it's been a major example of redemption for Haas. I mean, if you said to Kevin Magnussen 3 weeks ago, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm just sitting with Laura, my new daughter, twiddling my thumbs." And 3 weeks later, he's 5th place in a Haas at the Bahrain Grand Prix. What a turnaround for this team! I mean, they just absolutely, delving at the bottom of the 2021 season, just saying, "Look, we're going to continue. Is Gene going to pull the pin on this whole project?" We've got 2 rookie drivers. Mm-hmm. Clearly, that equation has not worked for them. But again, they did say in their own defence they weren't developing that car at all because they were waiting for the new car to turn up. So clearly, that decision to just run a very old tub with no development on it, literally just turning up to just be a showpiece, was what they got. I mean, they got nothing in return for it other than bills to cover the expenses of running the team. But the big thing is you've got to give Mick Schumacher credit as well. I mean, he's into his 2nd season, and it's in his blood, of course, to be a top-notch driver. But as you said, he was racing against both of the Alfa Romeos. Now, it was good to see the Ferrari customer engines battling in that way with each other, especially Mick himself. He's only just taken the first layer off, his time in F1 with 1 season under his belt, but he was battling another F2 driver in Zhou, who is the rookie. And there was a lot of criticism by people I've spoken to over time saying, "Oh, they don't need this Chinese driver, he's just going to be another complete dud driver or whatever." But I think, on a side note, Zhou proved himself. We'll probably discuss that later. But going back to Haas, I think they're going to be a really strong midfield team. If they can keep getting some good points, we may see a one-off race where everyone just gets obliterated in the first turn and the first half dozen cars get taken out, and Haas may end up with a podium, and Kevin or Mick could potentially get a podium. That's my thoughts, but I think it's just great to see Haas come back. Because I've met Gunther, and he's a lovely bloke, and he's a man who carries a lot of weight on his shoulders, and he's never really shown how hard it is. But I mean, when you speak to him in person, and you see he doesn't mix his words. He's pretty open in discussing what he's thinking. But I just think the result of Haas last night, even though Mick missed out on a point, it's just still a great return to being a racing team for Haas, and they may see sponsorship come back in other forms. People are going to say, "Look, you lost your principal sponsor for political reasons. We'll come on board because we can see the potential of what you've done with this new car."
I know you've told me before, but just for the benefit of our listeners, how did you come about to meet Gunther Steiner?
Well, I was lucky enough to be in the paddock 2 years ago at Melbourne. It was on the Thursday, and I was standing there talking to... I think I was outside the Mercedes hospitality unit, and somebody I was standing there with, I think it was Darren or AJ or Marcus, one, so he said, "Oh, there's Gunther Steiner." So, me being me, I just stood in front of him and said, "Hi, Gunther, it's nice to meet you." He said, "Oh, hello, how are you?" "Yeah." Anyway, got the obligatory photos with him, standing next to each other, and hey, good to meet you, nice to see you back. That was it, and Gunther walked off. No, we had a good chat for probably about 2 minutes, and he was a very nice bloke.
Legend. Absolute legend, yeah. I think we're all fans of Gunther Steiner. I mean, he's anyone that's been following Formula One for a while. You'd have seen him not just at the Haas team. You would have met him up and down the paddock. In previous years with different teams. He's definitely had. He's not been handed the best of situations with this Haas team. It's been kind of riddled with problems since the day he took it on. But it's good to see now that, things are coming to, they're starting to bear fruit, and the team is actually starting to show results. I can't help but feel, and I don't want to disrespect any of the Russian listeners or anyone that was a fan of Mazepin. Um, that since the exit of Mazepin, it feels a little bit. It feels a little bit. It's easier. It's almost like it's a breath of fresh air that you can breathe again. You don't have that pressure and that stress hanging over the team. And I'm not saying, I can only go by what I've seen on Drive to Survive in Netflix, and I can only see, go by the results that they've had last year. But it's good to see that that Mick Schumacher he's not just there constantly getting blue flagged and letting drivers by, the whole race. He's actually there. He's actually midfield battling for the last position of the points. You know what I mean? He's in the thick of it. I was just so happy to see the team that have been struggling for the last couple of seasons really get what they deserved in terms of what they've put into it. We all know that they abandoned their development of their car last year. They've had, I think, them being the back of the back of the team, the back of the grid last year means that I think they get more air tunnel, wind tunnel time. They get more CFD time. They get more time to do lots of things to be able to develop that car up. So the fact that they're already kind of midfield and they have now got the potential to really, accelerate their development over other teams, I'd be fairly confident that by mid-season, as long as other teams don't drive on and push forward too much, I think Haas have got a really good chance of, finishing somewhere P4, P5, P6 in the championship. I mean, they currently stand, believe me when I say this, right now, Haas are third in the Constructors' Championship. I repeat it, Haas are third in the Constructors' Championship of 2022. That's just unbelievable.
I mean, you could say as a joke, people are sick of Ferrari's dominance this season so far, but it's only been one race.
Yeah, one race, man. Hilarious. Well, we're staying on this kind of vein of Ferrari drivers. Okay, so Haas did well. Magnussen got a P5. Mick Schumacher got P11. What about Guanyong Zhou scoring points in his debut? What's your opinion there of the Alfa Romeo driver on his first outing?
I think it was a great result. You had to come in at 10th, grab a point for your first race as a F1 rookie. Going back to his F2 days, he certainly showed himself to be a pretty competent racer. Then he turned up to testing and he wasn't there to, just put his toe in the water. He dived in head first, and all through testing he was proving himself with times and reliability. And I think he's a better package than some people had labelled him. I think he's potentially going to be Alfa Romeo for a few seasons. I don't think any big teams are going to be troubling him with a fresh contract and a pen to say he signed this. But I think, give it a few races, he might just find his ground and just keep that Alfa Romeo going in a midfield position. I think he's a guy to watch, and he's not there as a paid driver. He's actually earned the seat. He doesn't have his dad handing over blank cheques to Freddie Vasseur to say, look, whatever it costs, just make sure my son gets a seat to, sit in and pedals to push. He's there and he's steering the car properly. He's racing. He's getting in the thick of it. So I've got to give the bloke credit. I think he's going to be someone to watch as a decent midfield driver. There's been paid drivers. You've got to look at Latifi. I don't know. Quickly change the subject. You've got to look at Nick Latifi and say, is he going to stay at Williams for much longer after this season even? I realise he's driving a Williams car, but his dad's throwing a shitload of coin into that team to get his company name on the rear wing. So maybe Williams just need a paid driver to keep afloat. But to go back to the original question, I reckon Zhou's proved himself as a decent wheelman.
you could definitely see from his racecraft during the Bahrain Grand Prix which we're talking about at the moment. Like some of his overtaking maneuvers were just amazing. He definitely deserves that last point. He battled his way there. He saw opportunities. The doors were left open, and he went straight through them. So I think he's definitely one to watch. It kind of reminds me of a 2007 Hamilton. He's got that same kind of confidence. You might say like Alonso also, when Alonso came into the sport. Again, that same kind of confidence, that pure natural. Stick him in any car and he can do things with it. Yeah, I think he's definitely one to watch. It's kind of a shame that we're not going to China this year. It would have been a great marketing boost for not only himself but for Alfa Romeo as well. But yeah, definitely, I think we should mark his card and see and follow him how he gets on through the season. I know you had him earmarked a couple of episodes ago, even before testing, as one to watch. He's got a worthy teammate also in Bottas, and just to briefly mention Bottas, I mean he did great to score points for Alfa Romeo in his first race with them. He definitely knows how to handle that car. He's adapted well. I think given a few more races, like you said, these first 2 or 3 races might just be kind of more of an extended tests for a lot of the teams. So I think once they get a handle on, really extracting everything out of the car, I think Bottas might be one to watch as well. I think he could rustle a few feathers up the top half of the grid. Moving on, I want to talk about firstly McLaren, and then we're going to talk about Aston Martin. But yeah, McLaren. As a McLaren fan, I am deeply, deeply disappointed. Deeply disappointed. My heart sank after qualifying yesterday, where they landed in the pecking order, but I remained hopeful that during the race they could quickly, Norris has been well known for making up places early on in the race. Ricciardo has always been known for being able to push forward and be the best of the late breakers, but really, really, really disappointed in McLaren. We had them tipped as being the ones to watch back in when we were watching Barcelona testing. We talked about their rear suspension setup. We talked about the lack of porpoising that the car had, that they were topping the timesheets at the start of testing in Barcelona. They moved on to Bahrain, a little different, but the confidence was still there. Then we were reading about this Google Android or Google Chrome sponsor there just a few days ago. They seem to have it all together. They seem to have it all packaged just right to be well up there competing with Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. And to finish 14th and 15th, I think that's the finishing positions. And only because of 3 DNFs in front of them further up the grid from Gasly, Perez, and Verstappen. I'm really heartbroken. And I know I was talking to Badge. If you don't know who Badge is, Ashley, he's a member of the group there. We're good friends and we're always chatting during the races. And yeah, he feels the same way. We're just completely gobsmacked as to how the fuck McLaren couldn't pull themselves further up that grid today. It was. I'm lost for words. I genuinely lost for words. What do you think about the whole thing?
I was just going to say, can we move on to Aston Martin? But I suppose I better say a few words, in condolence at least. Yeah. I'm gutted.
Lower the box into the.
Yeah, we'll just take a corner each of the coffin and just lower it in.
Yeah.
I'm, as an Aussie, I'm a Ricciardo fan. I've always backed down. I think he's a great character. Last week he was crook. He missed out on the second test. there's only so much you can really do in a simulator. You really got to get on the circuit and test the car, and that's where I think he may be on a bit of a back foot. I made a comment in the group and said, look, I'm just about to give up being a McLaren fan because of, especially after qualifying. I just went, shit, what am I witness to here? This is just beyond, not even beyond a joke. It's just I was just lost for words. I didn't know what to think or do. I mean, not that I could do anything, but yeah, some guy said to me, he said, I'll just stick with it. He said, McLaren will come back, and I can only hope that they do. I mean, they've got huge resources available to them. Andreas Seidel as the team boss is great. He really knows how to run that team, and I think he's done a great job for them. Zach Brown's a great team principal, and he steers them in the right direction at least. But I think but that's fine for those guys to stand on the pit wall. We're talking about the two drivers here. I think Norris has really got it in his head that he's got to beat Dan Rick, and then Dan Rick's got to beat Norris. But if you don't have the equipment to be able to, play in the sandpit with each other, you're going to sit on the side of the sandpit and watch all the other kids play. So I think McLaren are really going to, I think, as I keep saying, these three flyaway races being Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Australia, use them as glorified test sessions to say, right, where are we going wrong? Have we got it wrong with the rear suspension setup, inverting it compared to what other teams have got? Is there something wrong with the aero package? Is it the Mercedes engine that's not working for us? Is it the E10 fuel that doesn't work in the Mercedes engine like the other teams are struggling? Is it our gearbox, or is it just some other component within the car that's just not working for them? Because they just can't dial into the speed. And it was noted, I saw Martin Brundle made the comment, coming to turn 9 and 10 in quali, it was watching Dan Rick oversteer the car. He had to completely hang on to it. You watch another car come through, he just sails through, nails the corner of the apex, carries his speed and just drives off, whereas Dan Rick really had to keep oversteering the car. I don't mean to oversteer it, but he had to constantly keep correcting the steering of the car to get through turn 9 and 10. So whether they're not getting the front setup right, is the car just potentially not working with the 18-inch rims rather than the old 13s? They sort of a bit stuck with these new wheel sizes that hasn't worked for them. It could be anything, but I just hope in the three flyway races they use them as a test session to, go from front to back and say, right, this is what we found wrong with the car, we need to fix it. We'll turn up to Barcelona again. We know we did pretty better than average there for the winter test. Everyone knows the Catalonia circuit. Every team's got that much data on the joints. It's ridiculous. Turn up to the Spanish Grand Prix as their first decent attempt at trying to redeem themselves, even if they come back midfield in Spain.
I think it's an interesting point as well to make. Norris was struggling with the car early on in the race today as well. So, what you're saying about the whole setup of the car could be, I think you could be close to the truth, given that they had issues in Bahrain testing as well with the brake cooling problems. So they've had to, quickly redevelop the front end braking system for cooling. That's may have just led to aero issues. So using the bigger braking ducts or whatever they've had to do on the front end is actually it's actually affected the way that car, the drivability of that vehicle, and they're both fighting with it. I don't think it's a power unit issue. I think it's definitely set up, because they were doing so well, during testing, and even in Bahrain, they were one of the few cars that were going through turns 9, 10, which we talked about in a previous podcast with Stacey last time out. That's the slow corners is where these new cars are struggling, and McLaren was one of the few cars that didn't seem to struggle in the slower corners. So I didn't see any of the interviews after the race with McLaren. I kind of got a bit pissed off after a while. I kind of shut it off because although the racing was good, and hats off to the new regulations and the architects of that, I was just so deflated by McLaren, and I think we'll touch on this as well. We'll move to Aston Martin racing as well in this same kind of vein of discussion. And I know Vettel tested positive for COVID, so he wasn't able to take part of the race, and they called on Hülkenberg, the reserve driver, to step in and take over. But again, after all the hype, and this is why, again, guys, anyone in the group that's listening to this, any of our listeners out there, take car launches with a pinch of salt, because they never ever translate onto track. That car launch from Aston Martin, it was going to be the next big thing. Vettel said, they have it together. They've got some great engineers. They've done wonders. They've got the Mercedes power unit, blah, 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 blah. And we were all kind of falling for it, and then the car was launched and we were like, okay, wow, yeah, Aston Martin, have they got this right? Have they been able to nail this with the side pods, with the vents and the whole thing? And I mean, first race of the season, man, and like they were fucking nowhere. You know what I mean? They were absolutely fucking nowhere. Now, granted, you could say Hülkenberg had very limited time in that car. He's gone basically from simulator to the real thing, and maybe in a way, it's a good way to test the correlation between the two. But still really, really, really disappointing. I'm kind of putting them in that. I'm shelving this. I'm filing these with McLaren and Aston Martin as the just pure fucking dog shit of the Bahrain 2022 Grand Prix. It's just fuck it, lads. They need to get their act together. Whatever issues they've got going on, they need to sort them quick.
I've got to say I agree. The only good thing I think from Aston Martin is, well, the Hulk, looking at it this way, the Hulk, he's gone from the seat in the coffee shop to the seat in the cockpit of the Formula One car again on very short notice. Lead Stroll, my thoughts on him. The bloke couldn't drive a sharpened stick into a fresh dog turd. And the best thing for Otmar Zafnauer is that he's left what is now a backmarket team and gone to a midfield team with Alpine. That's my thoughts on Aston Martin. Surprise. Move on. I've listened to Lawrence Stroll's podcast last year, and he's like, I've got all this money. I'm going to build the world's biggest wind tunnel, and you could fit a 747 in it. Well, that's great, but money doesn't buy you wind.
Yeah, watch this space. I'm just hoping those few teams, Williams, Aston Martin, McLaren, they seem to be lurking down the back after the first race. I'm hoping they can turn things around. Obviously, I'm always hopeful, but watch this space. I want to move on to tyres, Durko, because I know there was a few bits of discussion during the race thread, and for people that don't know what we're talking about, every race, every session, we have our own thread, our own post in the F1 Armchair Experts Facebook group. So we get to talk about what's going on live. And there was a few comments made about tyres. I had a few notes taken myself. In a previous episode, and again we touched on it earlier, in a previous episode I mentioned that the lower tyre temp on the blankets, and for those that don't know, I think that the previous tyre temperatures on blankets when the cars were in the pits or tyres were being warmed ready before a pit change was 110 or 120 degrees. That's now been reduced to 80 degrees. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, we've moved to 18-inch rims, so we've gone from 13-inch to 18-inch rims on the wheels. So we have a lot lower sidewall, a lot smaller sidewall of the tyre, so a lot less flex. technically they should heat up a lot quicker. They should, we've got a bigger rear tire, a narrower front tire. But I never thought it would be as bad as what it was. So what we had basically alluded to is all these changes were going to make a big difference to the pit stops. That after the pit stop, when they're doing their out lap, in particular, the cars were going to struggle for tire temperature, and even given Bahrain and the temperature that it was there today, and I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I think it had gone up since qualifying, and it was even hotter again since free practice. But they struggled to get temperature into the tires, and I'm going to use and again, if you want to go back to the race, anybody that's listening, go back to when Hamilton, they decided to pit Hamilton early. So he started off on the soft tire. Again, another change when it comes to tires is that the top 10 can now choose their starting tire. So previously they had to start on whatever tire they qualified fastest in Q2. Jesus, that's a mouthful. But now they're able to pick whatever tire they want. So he started out in the soft tyre. Again, Hamilton started out in the soft tyre. And after about, I don't know how many laps it was fairly early on, kind of lap 9, lap 10, I forget. He pitted and went to the hard tyre. And the moment he came out of the pits, he was struggling for grip. He was understeering. He was struggling for traction. He really fought that outlap to keep the car on the track. And it made it exciting. In that exact moment, I was like, "Oh wow, this is real. This is exactly how we had predicted this would happen." And I think Ross Brawn and Pat Symonds had wanted this to happen. This is part of their overall design, that tires would play a part in, in how the cars perform before and after the pit stops. But I'm still kind of pissed in a way that it's once again Pirelli that are almost kind of like the defining factor in, how races are played out. Yeah, you could say, okay, look, Honda had 3 failures, fair enough, but it's back to tires again. It's all tires. Looking after the tires. If you also notice as well, that whole middle stint, we had a fairly electric, exciting, dramatic first kind of like 6, 8, 10 laps. Cars were very close to each other. Obviously the aerodynamics are working. And then we had the same after the safety car near the end of the race. But that whole middle 20 laps where I don't know if our listeners would agree, but I lost all the graphics. I had no timing screen for like 7 or 8 laps. But so I didn't know what was going on. But there was no overtaking. There was nothing happening in that midfield. There was no cars, there was no battles going on. Everybody was protecting their tyres. So seeing Hamilton, the high deg, and for those that don't know what deg is degradation. So it's when the tyre degrades and it loses its grip. But I was just kind of confused as to how we've arrived here again. With this whole tyre thing, I hope Pirelli are able to take all the data from this race, and maybe, I mean, we used the 3 hardest compounds. We used the 3 hardest compounds available, and yet the softest tyre was burnt out after kind of like 10 laps, which was just crazy. That tells you the level of downforce that they have on these cars. And obviously now the driving style has to change. So those that had tyre problems in this race, I think we're going to see them tweaking their driving style slightly over coming races. But there's still an element of protecting the tyres, looking after the tyres. We were kind of promised that, tyres wouldn't be a problem and these guys could just race and go flat out and they wouldn't have to worry too much. But yeah, I'm kind of annoyed about it. I don't know. How do you see it?
The way I see it is, I just keep banging on with the same argument regarding tyres. There needs to be a second manufacturer come into it. Pirelli just can't run this monopoly anymore. it was interesting to note that, obviously, as you said, when Hamilton came in, changed his soft boots for a set of hards. As soon as he got out there, he was about second corner into it. He said, "Man, these tyres, they're not working." And Bono said, "Yeah, it's because they're cold, and you're on a hard compound, therefore you've got no grip." And it was interesting to note from there that every time, especially with the Bahrain Grand Prix, normally you think it's a one or two stop, but some cars came in and changed tyres 4 times. And I made the comment in the race thread that the pit lane was almost as busy as the actual circuit was itself. There was cars constantly coming in, changing tyres, going to a medium compound towards the end, then they come to the last 5 laps on about a soft compound to just try and gain some place, or at least get the point for the fastest lap or whatever they could. But I think it's been a complete changing of the guard, at least with the move to the 18-inch tyre, because it's a different beast. In terms of the way the tyre, the heat is retained within the tyre, and I think they're potentially going off quicker, especially the softs. I mean, they say now, you lock up and flat spot a pair of these, especially the fronts, you're stuffed for that whole lap. You just got to get rid of them there and then. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I reckon we're going to see a lot more pit stops, because the tyres are going off quicker. They're not retaining. I don't know. There was some level of durability about the old 13-inch tyres that they could stretch them. I mean, we used to see races where they, potentially over a 50-lap race, they do 5 laps on the softs to, start the race. Lap 5 or 6, they come in for a set of hards and they just sit on them. Like, I think it was Alonso or Ocon, potentially got through most of the race on one set of hards or mediums, and they thought, how can this tyre last this long? It just kept going and going. But as I said, I think there's got to be a second manufacturer come into the series just to liven up Pirelli a bit, so that their product's the best they can deliver. The other thing is, I think just get rid of tyre blankets altogether, because I'd like to know how much actual temperature is lost from the time it comes off the pit wall or the rack where it's sitting for the wheel guy to then drag it across with no tyre blanket on it, because he doesn't take a tyre blanket to the pit stop. He takes a raw tyre that's losing ambient temperature in that couple of metres he's going to get from the rack to the grid spot. How much actual temperature is lost. Now, if they're going from 80 degrees, are they dropping, I don't know, potentially 25, 30 degrees in temperature, and they're only going onto the car with, say, 50 degrees centigrade worth of actual temperature in the outermost layer of the skin of the tyre? And how much is it really worth that extra 15 degrees compared to, say, an ambient track temperature of 35 degrees? Why don't they just leave them on the rack? Car comes in for a pit, grab that set of tyres that have got the chalk mark on it, left front, left right. And just chuck the tyres on straight off the rack. That's my thoughts. I think tyre blankets are just a thing of the past. Sure, maybe when you go to Catalonia, like it was a few years ago for winter testing, it was freezing cold and snowing, you might need to thaw the tyres out a bit then, so they're not complete ice tyres as such. But I think tyre blankets got to go. Just leave the tyres sitting there on the rack as at the ambient temperature, and just let the drivers heat them up as best they know how to.
Yeah, I think actually that's part of the master plan for Formula One, was to actually get rid of tyre blankets altogether, and I do believe that they should have been gone this season, but a slight change. Pirelli were worried that it'd be too soon, that it would have to be gradual, so they've reduced the temperature of the tyre blankets for this year. I think they're looking at reducing them again next year down to 50 degrees or 40 degrees, and then you're going to have your tyre blankets removed, in 2024. I'm just looking at the pit stop strategy for the race now. I can't pull it up on the screen, but for those people that know their way around the internet, it looks something like this. It's definitely the soft, medium soft was definitely the preferred strategy. But one thing that I'm just noticing here, and I'm only just realizing it now as I'm looking at it, Mick Schumacher, he finished P11, was the only man to two stop. He was the only man in the race to two stop. Everybody else three stopped or four stopped. So fair play to him. I think that's how he became P11. If I think about it now, so under the safety car, he actually didn't pit. He stayed out on the tires that he was on, and which were softs that had done. They'd only done about 10. They'd only done about 14 laps at that stage. So, yeah, there's a theory that we now need. I know this is a bit of chatter in some of the technical forums that I'm in, that we might actually need a harder compound again. So, we've got the C1, the C2, the C3, which are kind of the three hardest compounds. They're thinking of bringing in a C0, which would be a harder compound again, just given the amount of downforce these cars have, the extra weight as well these cars have. That's an important note as well. The cars are heavier. I know the FIA had agreed, I think only as late as last week, to an extra couple of kilograms on the car weights, and some of the drivers as well have put on a few kilos of weight in terms of muscle, because they've had to build up their neck and their upper body to withstand the forces of these new ground effect cars. So they've had to go down the muscle route of building muscle over the last 12 to 18 months. I find all that really, really fascinating, when it comes to the tyres. But yeah, second tyre supplier, I think it's time. But in the same sentence, I'm feeling that they'll never go for a second tyre supplier. One, it's going to be too expensive. Two, it's going to add additional cost when they're at a time when they're trying to actually cut cost. It isn't very. They seem to be moving very much towards a series type formula, like Formula 2 and Formula 3, where a lot of the parts are standardized. So I can't. I would love to see a second tyre supplier in F1, but I can't see it happening. Yeah. Can I ask you a question regarding the race? Do you think Charles Leclerc deserved driver of the day?
Potentially not. No, I think for what it's worth, my vote went with K-Mag only because the bloke was parachuted into the seat. He hadn't done any testing really with the current tub that he's put his foot into, and he's delivered a fifth place. I mean, of course, there was attrition with Verstappen and Chico going out, but he's got a P5 and he's got a handful of points for the team at least. I reckon K-Mag should have got driver of the day. In all honesty, I think
season.
He was one down. We've got 22 to go. I don't want to talk about that Russian replacement in a minute. I just think the driver of the day thing is a bit of a gimmick. It does nothing for me. I don't agree with it. I mean, people have got their favourite drivers, favourite team. Leave it at that. I think the driver of the day thing, the whole voting system, it's just a gimmick, and they put it up, on the screen. You get this pop-up comes up, vote for driver of the day. Now, piss off with the bloody graphic. I want to watch the race, not about texting some guy's racing car number to phone number. Don't worry about it. It's just it's a gimmick. But anyway, I reckon K-Mag, for what it's worth, got driver of the day.
I would second that, definitely. I think K-Mag was driver of the day. For me, he did a great job given the machinery that he was in and the amount of limited time that he had. So to pull that off was great. One follow-up question to that. There was an incident with Ocon and Mick Schumacher earlier on in the race. I think it was around lap 5, but I will have to fact check that. There was no damage. They banged wheels. Mick spun. Again, a testament to these bigger wheels. They can take a bit of a bashing. now, as opposed to the older, smaller wheels. But Ocon got a 5 second time penalty, and also got 2 penalty points added to his race license. I think he's up to 3 penalty points now. I'll have to double check, but I think that's the number that I read earlier. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that was fair? Was that well judged by the race director?
I think it's a complete joke that he's got 2 penalty points for what I deemed a racing incident. He got the 5 second penalty. There was no damage done. Mick Schumacher kept going. Yeah, it was a rubbing of the wheels. I mean, they say rubbing's racing. Well, why cop 2 penalty points for a racing incident? The 2 blokes trying to get through the same bit of real estate that's a corner, and his super licenses copped a dent. I mean, really? No. I mean, the new race director's got to, not shit in his own nest too much, and he's got to, he's got to make his mark after what happened with, Massey being dismissed. I get that. He's got to come in and say, look, for whatever reason, FIA have, in that regard, have handed their ruling. We've moved on from that. This guy is obviously just trying to make his own mark. It's a new playground for him. I mean, he's come from Formula E and DTM, and he might just be saying, look, I'm going to be the hard taskmaster from the get-go, from day one. Don't mess with me. But I think 2 penalty points off Ocon's licence is it's just an absolute bloody joke. The 5 second penalty was enough as it is. Move on.
Yeah, it's I suppose race director was probably the wrong word I used there. It should have been obviously the race stewards. It was the stewards that issued the penalty, but at the end of the day, the race director oversees all of that, and I suppose backs them in their decision. I don't think that was fair that he got 2 penalty points. That suggests that it was dangerous driving. But like you said, I think he wants to lead with an iron fist. He wants to make it known from race one that he means business, that there's no shit with him, and that he will make harsh decisions. And yeah, okay, you might not like him, but go fuck yourself. He doesn't give a shit. This is racing. If you don't like the referee's decision, go race somewhere else. That's pretty much his attitude, and I think I think that's needed, especially after Abu Dhabi. Oh my God, did I mention Abu Dhabi? I'm so sorry. I apologize. But yeah, especially after Abu Dhabi last year, we need someone to take it by the balls and run with it. And as long as it doesn't get too silly. But in the first race, we see Ocon getting 2 penalty points for racing incident. I'm on the fence. I didn't actually see it evolving. I didn't see it take place. I only saw the replay. But yeah, you're the judge. If you say it was a racing incident, then I will side with you. Last but not least, and we're going to wrap this podcast up, because again, we don't want to dissect the race into too many little pieces. We just kind of want to, just kind of summarize it the way we felt. But next up on the calendar is Rowdy Arabia, or Saudi Arabia as it's more commonly known. Are you looking forward to it? Given what you've seen in today's race from Bahrain, do you think are we in for a good one there? Is it again going to be like what we've said in previous episodes of the podcast? Is it going to be an absolute lottery? Is it whose cars do you think it's going to suit? Now that you've seen them racing in Bahrain, and you know who's quick on the straights, you know who's struggling in the tight corners, you know who's got power unit issues, you know who's seems to be racing midfield. Could you call it? Do you think you could call it? How do you think Saudi Arabia is going to go down?
I think I can't call it. I mean, it's going to be.
Who's your poll? Who's your poll? Who's your poll?
If I go all out for poll, I'm going to say Symonds. I think he's just going to say, righto, Leclerc keeps winning. He had it in Bahrain, but I think Symonds is just going to be the El Matador and, just go flat out, I'd say. I was always critical of potential before we even got to the Saudi Arabian, to the Jeddah street circuit. I was critical of it because I thought, no, it's just another gimmick street circuit, but once we had the race there, it turned out to be a pretty decent race because it is so fast. It's really an edge of your seat, sort of just to hang on for,
And you wanted to slow it down.
Potentially, but I think they've made some changes to it to potentially iron out some of the issues that were identified. But I think I'd go back on my criticism of the Jeddah Street circuit before they actually went there. I think it is a great circuit. It's fast, it's tight, it's challenging. I'll just have to wait and see what they've done with the minor tweaks they've made to it. But I'm going to call, as I said, Sainz for pole position. And I'm looking forward to it. I mean, yeah, political side of stuff of the location of where it is. I mean, you can put the circuit anywhere. It just happens to be in Saudi Arabia. But that aside, I think it's going to be a great event.
Yeah, I'd second that, and only 7 days away. I mean, we're recording this podcast only, 4 or 5 hours after the Bahrain Grand Prix, and I'm already excited that we've got another race next weekend, to look forward to. So it's literally 5 days until free practice, 6 days till qualifying, and then we're into the race this time next week, and we're going to be sitting here again, hopefully the same time next week. God knows what the discussion is going to be, but I'm really, really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the whole season. I had said it previously that I'm really excited, and I think we're gonna change. We're gonna see changes each race. I think as you see the cars develop and the teams get on top of their issues, I can see there's going to be a skip full of fuel pumps out the back of Milton Keynes come Monday morning. They're all going to be changed out. But overall, I want your opinion, and we're going to finish up with this. Overall, I want your opinion on, have Ross Brawn and Pat Symonds done a good job with these new regulations? Are you happy with the way the cars are performing? Has it exceeded your expectations? Has it met your expectations? Just give me your overall opinion now that we've got the first race over with and all the hype around these new regulations. Where's your mind at now?
These new changes are 12 months behind where they were meant to be. I mean, 2021 was meant to be the season we saw these changes. I think, for what it's worth, Ross Brawn and Pat Symonds, they've done an outstanding job with what they've done to design these cars, upset the aero rules completely. I mean, there's been changes to car rules and regs over time, but this is just a completely... I'll salute you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Ross Brawn and Pat Symonds, we bestow upon you the highest award possible from the F1 Armchair Experts of F1 Gods. Thank you for all you've done.
I think they've done an outstanding job. I made the comment last night, F1 is back. I mean, we saw...
Yeah.
From the first lap, there was two different packs of cars racing. The 18-inch tyres. I mean, as I said before, all the pit stops that are going on. The cars, they can't drive behind each other because they're too unsettled. E10 fuel. I mean, potentially Merck can't get their mapping right, or the fuel pumps are blown up.
But they will.
This is just a complete change, the biggest change. I mean, in all the 35 odd years I've been watching Formula One, this is just such an... Yes, I'm that old. This has just been such a massive change in the way the sport's run, and I think it's relit a spark in a lot of fans to say, wow, this is the racing we have been yearning for, and they've delivered it. I mean, after one race, we're just going, shit, if that's one race, we've got 22 to go. And one closing comment I want to make is, I mean, obviously Russia's been had their contract torn up, as we know, but the hot rumour is that the replacement race for that weekend is, because F1's contracted to do 23 races, is that the circuit, the calendar at least, is going to be filled by Qatar. So they'll go back there for a bit of a sprint round.
Oh. What's your source?
I heard it somewhere. Don't quote me, but I think Qatar could be somewhere. I mean, I'd love them to go back to Malaysia because it's only up the road from Singapore, and it'd be easy for logistics just to go to Sepang. But I think Qatar's the red hot favourite to be the replacement for Russia.
So overall, you're happy with the new formula?
Oh, love it. I'm like you. I can't wait for next weekend. I'm happy to lose deprived sleep and fall asleep on the lounge between sessions just so I can watch it, because I think these new regs have just delivered something unreal for us.
Actually, just on that now, and I know we're trying to keep this to an hour, but I always find that fascinating, and I don't think people realise the hardship that Aussies have to go through when it comes to watching Formula One. For us here in Europe, I mean, I was away camping for the weekend for St. Patrick's Day, and we headed down west. We had a lovely weekend, and we got up this morning, had a fry up around the barbecue. We packed away the van, we packed everything up, and we kind of moseyed on home, nice and handy. Got home, unpacked everything, made a cup of tea, and I sat down in the middle of the afternoon and popped on the Formula One race. Oh, here we go. This is great. Will you make me another sandwich there, love? No problem. Great. And I'll have another cup of tea while you're at it. And I sit down and I enjoyed the race. What's it like for Aussies? Tell the listeners what it's like being an Aussie and a Formula One fan.
Yeah, it's been the bane of my life, getting up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning to watch the USA or Brazil and Mexico. Yeah, it was a 1:30 a.m. alarm for me this morning to get up for 2 a.m. kickoff of the race for Bahrain. And I'll do it again next weekend for Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, I can take Mondays off work. But, I've always laughed at myself over the years when, the Australian Grand Prix on, and, I'm usually at the Australian Grand Prix sitting there and you see comments, I can't imagine, I've got to get up, I've got to get up at 6:30 in the morning to watch a Grand Prix race. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then people whinge when Japan's on and say, 7 in the morning, I've got to put on extra toast because Japan's on at 7 in the morning. I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's the one race I can sit down and actually have a beer and watch a race. Yeah,
I love the early race. I love the early races because, I've no problem. I'm always an early bird anyway, so getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock. I'll be honest. The older that I've got now, because I'm in my 40s, but the older that I've got now, I don't get up for free practice anymore that early. But I'll definitely get up for qualifying. And if I don't make it up for qualifying, I've actually, I think in the last couple of seasons, I think just the dominance of Mercedes as well. I just kind of I didn't see any point in getting up for it because we knew what the result, the top three were going to be. So but definitely the race. I love getting up early and putting on the Bluetooth headphones so that I don't wake up the rest of the house, and kind of instead of shouting at the TV, I'm like, fuck you, Hamilton, But and actually, I'll tell you another funny story as well. Like I said, I was away camping down in Kerry, which is southwest of Ireland, for anybody that doesn't know, and it's a very nice spot. It's where they filmed Star Wars or Star Trek. I'm going to get killed for that now, but something like that anyway. And the amount of the amount of people that I saw going around with Red Bull Verstappen t-shirts on them, and they were all different people. They weren't in the same group. There was like of the four corners of the campsite, there was Red Bull. I just kept my fucking mouth shut. I know I was taking a piss up in the toilet at one stage, and one guy came in beside me with a Red Bull t-shirt on him, and the other guy came in beside me with a Red Bull kind of a jacket on him, and I was fucking, my head was about to fucking explode as a McLaren fan sandwiched between two Red Bull fans. And I know for a fact that these guys have only started following Formula One since December last year. I could just feel it. They just, it's definitely F1 fever has definitely taken over the world. I think we talk about Abu Dhabi. If you're a diehard F1 fan, we all know what happened in Abu Dhabi, and we all kind of we don't talk about it. But it's definitely done wonders for the sport to see last season two great drivers go to the very last race, the very last lap of the very last race, and then to see these new regulations now kick in, and it's kind of flowed on almost from that last race, and it's given us some really good battles. It's given us controversy. It's given us this lottery that we've talked about of the unknown, who's where. And I think the development race this year is going to be key to how this plays out. But yeah, that's my funny waffly story. I'll probably end up editing this out. So yeah.
I think the two blokes at the campsite were wondering why you're wearing a Alonso shirt.
Fuck you. I wouldn't be seen dead in an Alonso shirt. I know, Badge, if you're listening to this podcast, Badger, if you're listening to this podcast, and I know you are because you told me earlier that you were going to, I told you I was recording it and you were going to listen to it tomorrow, but Badge knows deep down that he is Alonso's biggest fan, and secretly he pretends to be a McLaren fan. He pretends to be a McLaren fan, but deep down he's rooting for Alpine. He doesn't want to make it known to the whole group, but if you're listening, Badge, we know, man. It's okay. It's okay.
I think he's got a Mod 7 Benetton bed cover, hasn't he?
Yeah. But definitely not me in an Alonso t-shirt. Absolutely not. And for anyone that doesn't know me, I am anti-Alonso. Of the worst kind. You really don't want to get into that conversation with me. But guys, it's been a pleasure recording this podcast for everyone. And this was our first, I suppose, proper podcast after a race where we had proper content. We've been trying to, I suppose, hash podcasts together since Christmas to try and just put content out there. But we actually have something to talk about now. So apologies if it's gone off in tangents. Apologies if we haven't covered some top topics. We will definitely be looking through the group over this coming week and trying to include as much as we can in the next episode. So, any last words from you, Durko, before we sign off?
Final words. I just want to say, as I've already iterated, this season is going to be unreal. The change in the cars, the tyres, everything, the whole package is just. It's all new and it's exciting, and I just can't wait to, see the end of it and look back and say, wow, this has been the best season of F1 I've ever watched. That's what I'm certainly hoping to say at the tail end of this year.
Great stuff. I think I'd wholeheartedly agree. So guys, don't forget to check us out. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts. You can also check out the video version of this podcast on YouTube. Just remind us again, Durko, what's the name of the YouTube channel?
Motorsport Armchair Expert.
Great stuff. So don't forget to give us a subscribe and a like. That will help. Move us up the ranking a little bit. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. And it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
Take it easy, guys. Good luck.
Bye bye.